Kelsey Dyer. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my PLC plan today for you. First up, I have my table of contents. I've broken it down into what I have on each slide, starting with my vision statement, all the way down to next steps. What will I do going forward after this PLC? On my agenda today, first up, like I said, I have my vision statement. So what do I believe? What are my goals as a literacy specialist? And I will share that with you. I have my focus problem. What are the concerns that I'm seeing in my classroom that I would like to present to you today, and my strategy solutions that I have to try and fix that, to work on it. I have a research-based article that correlates with my concern that I'm seeing. I have data that I will collect. We are currently out of school in the summer, so I have my data and a hypothesis of my expected outcome of this strategy. What do I think will happen? How will this work? How will my students react to it? All that fun stuff. And then next steps, looking to the future. What will I continue to do after this PLC? First up is my vision statement. So my vision as a literacy specialist is to inform and enlighten fellow educators on best practices and new ideas. My goal for myself, as well as my colleagues, is to carry this information back to our classrooms to support and instruct our students. In my classroom specifically, I will provide my students with a safe, nurturing environment where they can express themselves and be the best that they can be. Not only academically, but socially and emotionally as well. Next up, I have my focus problem. So what is this PLC about? What are concerns that I'm seeing in my classroom that I would like to work on, that my students need to work on? In my classroom, I'm seeing a concern with my students' lack of ability to raise their hand to speak. And I know with younger students, early elementary education, we see this a lot, and it tends to become very, very frustrating. So I kind of have it mapped out of what I would like to do to help this. So that is my focus problem. They can't raise their hand to speak, so in other words, they are blurting out. This not only causes disruption in my classroom, but it also interferes with the learning of other classmates in the class as well. So it's definitely something that I, as a personal goal, would like to work on in order to help my students. My research-based article that I found was called A Preliminary Investigation of Kindergarten Teachers' Use of Praise in a General Education Classroom. So you're probably thinking, why does she have an article on praise? Well, as we all know, teacher praise, of course, has a positive effect on student behavior, but not just student behavior, but student disruptive behavior in the classroom. How often do we praise? How often do you praise? Is it enough? Do you know if you're praising? So, something to kind of take away from this, have a mental note, have a post-it, during your lessons, during your school day. Are you praising your students enough? You think you might be, but if you're actually taking note, if you're asking someone to watch you for a lesson, would be a good goal to have, would be a good goal to look into. Am I praising my students enough? Because we all know as teachers, when we are praised, it feels really good. It motivates us. So the authors of this article researched and studied 4 general education classrooms and specifically their teachers, looking in depth at the amount or the frequency of the praise they were giving their students. They discussed specific praises, finding that the praise among the 4 teachers were generally the same. So they were praising, but it also looked into what were they praising, what kind of behaviors. And so they came up with most of the praise was general and did not focus around that behavior-specific praise that I think correlates with my concern of students blurting out. Am I praising them enough when they do raise their hands? So my solution or strategy on how I plan to fix this problem is called a blurt chart that you will see down here. Making the chart is easy. Get yourself a poster board, write your students' names, Velcro 3 dots next to each name. And now I'm going to talk about what is actually on those little pictures. There is a story out there called My Mouth is a Volcano. And this story is a picture book. I teach kindergarten, so it's especially important in the early elementary classrooms that you use visuals, that, children's books are very important very good to use as lessons to teach your students. So before introducing this blurt chart, I would read the story, My Mouth is a Volcano. It's about this little boy and his perspective about how he has all these thoughts and he just wants to get them out. And so they eventually wiggle and jiggle inside of him and get up to his teeth, and just he erupts, and so everything comes out. So he said, my mouth is a volcano. I can't stop. I don't know what to do. And so as this boy's perspective on, in the classroom, at home, I definitely see a lot of students relating to that. So I think it's a great idea to use a story, a children's book, to introduce this strategy. So, of course, if a student blurts out an answer, talks when they are not supposed to, etc., all those behaviors we know and love, they will lose one volcano. Volcanoes will then go inside of a cup or whatever you would like to do with them. Specifics on rules can be made at your own discretion. I personally will not allow my students to earn back a volcano, since every day they will start with 3 new ones. If a student loses all 3 of their volcanoes, we all know we have those students. In my classroom, whatever you like to do, they will have to clip down on our behavior management clip chart. Any blurts after that will continue to result in a clip down, and that, of course, is to your discretion what you want to do at that point. I will keep a tally chart with my students' names on the left to keep track of the volcanoes lost. This is solely just for my records and use. Again, based on your discretion, you can reward students however you like. I will reward my students at the end of each day according to how many volcanoes they have left. So trying to focus on that praise that my article spoke about. Praising my students at the end of the day. Oh my goodness, you have 2 volcanoes left. You have 3. How awesome. If they have 1, tell them the next day, let's really work on trying to have 2 volcanoes left on your chart. And the kind of rewards that I'll give, stickers, a clip up, praise, trying to reward them, motivate them intrinsically instead of extrinsically. The data I will keep, like I said, I'll have a class list with tally marks depending on how many volcanoes each student loses at the end of each day. On Fridays, I will evaluate or count everybody's tallies, turn that into a bar graph. Each Friday, I will compare the newest bar graph with the previous ones to look for similarities or differences. Using this data, I will focus in on the students who seem to be blurting out even when using the chart. So this Friday, Bobby lost 2 each day. On average, lost 2 each day. Week 2, he's still losing on average 2 each day. He is someone I will want to focus on. So my hypothesis of the outcome. What do I think is going to happen? I have 3. I've broken it down to 3 hypotheses. My first one, I think that the blurt chart will be very effective for students who have a hard time controlling their blurts. Many students who struggled at the beginning will hopefully gain more control and learn how to raise their hand if they have something to say. My second one, I hypothesize that the data I collect will allow me to focus in on those students who are continuing or still struggling with their blurting out, even when using the chart. And my last one, my third one, I hypothesize that the blurt chart will be a great visual for students. Just like the storybook, they need their visuals, and will aid in their intrinsic motivation to listen and follow directions in the classroom. That's ultimately my goal, is for them to be intrinsically motivated to follow our classroom rules, to listen, follow directions, behavior that we have gone over since the first day of school. My next steps going forward, so if my hypotheses, if they turn out to be correct and everything works out in my way, I will continue using the blurt chart as much as needed. Then I would eventually want to move from individual student rewards, individual student goals, to a class reward system, depending on how well that goes. If all of my students, on average, are maybe only losing 1 a day, or many of them are not losing any at all, I would love to move towards a class reward system. So maybe blurt beans, a jar of, jelly beans, or a jar of marbles, trying to earn something in the long run, a pizza party, a pajama day, something like that. And then according to the collected data, I will focus on those students who are still struggling with burning out. I will be able to differentiate and provide more individualized interventions with these students if needed. The data will also give me detailed information to share with parents via our conferences, emails, texts, calls, whatever it may be. Keeping an open communication with parents on student behavior is very, very important. And the data that you will collect from this will be very beneficial to you if parents come to you with behavior concerns. And that was my PLC plan. Thank you for listening.